Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Phenomena. Phenomena is a Spanish horror comedy that tells the true story of the Hepta Group, a group of people dedicated to researching paranormal events and uncovering the truth behind them. This movie documents one of their most famous cases, in which their leader, Father Pallon, goes missing after investigating what seems to be an ordinary case. His pupils Sagrario, Paz, and Gloria all band together to try and find their missing mentor and determine his fate. This leads them falling deeper into the same mystery that their leader tried to decipher, which in turn puts them at risk as well. For me personally, this ended up being one of the stranger movies I've seen on Netflix. It's definitely not bad, as its visual presentation and atmosphere helped draw me into the movie's world, but the confusing story and lack of characterization tended to pull me out of it as well, so I found myself in a sort of middle ground with this one. Of the three girls, Sagrario is the one that has the most notability, or at least the greatest degree of responsibility. She's the most level-headed of the three, and is able to take charge during freaky or otherwise serious situations, so she is convincing as someone who has to take charge of the group in the leader's absence. There's not much else to her character beyond this, but she does have a decent amount of backstory behind her association with Father Pallon, and how she came to be involved in the group in the first place. It adds enough exposition to the story as far as her character goes, without overwhelming the rest of the story. Unfortunately, I found the other two girls to be lacking in comparison with Sagrario. Gloria works as a medium to communicate with spirits the group encounters, while Paz use audio-visual equipment to detect and possibly locate them. And in this sense, I like that they all have unique roles to offer, as well as differing personalities. However, I didn't find their personalities to be all that appealing, because they either felt exaggerated or understated. Gloria causes a lot of drama within the group, which I'm not opposed to, as it shows how different everyone is, but she raises a fuss so much that it causes a lot of artificial conflict to pop up where it's not needed, especially in the final act. Conversely, Paz didn't have that much to offer apart from comic relief. While there were a few times where her antics and lines of dialogue made me chuckle, I just didn't feel like she had all that much purpose with the story meant to be taking place. As a group, their chemistry is okay, if not exactly inspiring. Sagrario's presence makes the other two members more tolerable, and they have a lot of fun banter between each other that makes them more believable as a group of trained ghost hunters that finds themselves lost without their leader to help them. I just thought it was weird how the movie managed to flesh out Sagrario's backstory, but didn't put the same amount of effort toward Paz or Gloria. They seem like accessories to whatever Sagrario is doing, so even though they act like comrades, it never felt like they were ever building toward anything meaningful. I sort of felt the same about the story as a whole, which is odd because I actually loved how it began. The opening sequence has an intriguing sequence of events that builds from showing the setting, introducing each member of the group, and then showing Father Pallon disappearing. The movie sets up its story perfectly, and it maintains a mysterious vibe after it concludes, which is appropriate for everything else that takes place. Sadly though, the movie's tension falters not long after this, as the movie becomes progressively more boring to watch. In general, the story is quite slow-paced, which by itself isn't a bad thing, as it makes sense for characters to take time to find clues, analyze them, and try to connect them to the overarching mystery at play. Rather, it has to do with the fact that there seems to be no sense of urgency behind the mystery to begin with, and the story itself often shifts focus. It feels like every other scene, the movie will go from investigating Pallon's whereabouts, to some sort of beef between Sagrario and Gloria, and then something else, and then back to looking for Pallon. The mounting number of random plot details and insignificant characters popping up continually distracted from the main plot at hand. And that's a shame, because a lot of effort was put into the paranormal aspect of the movie and the whole investigation behind it. Even as unfocused as it is, it still has this level of suspense behind who the ghost is, where it came from, and what it wants. And it's this sense of unknown that kept me invested to see how the mystery would pay off. I also liked how realistic it was as a ghost-oriented movie. Everything from the lack of flashy special effects to how the cinematography was framed gave it this sort of documentary-type impression that kept the story grounded, and made me feel immersed in the story during the more intense moments. This being said, as with the characters, the ghost's origins and the mystery surrounding it never adds up to anything worthwhile. If I'm being honest, I had a hard time making sense of anything related to it, because there's so much else happening in the movie that the main plot ends up feeling undercooked. I was also a bit disappointed with how cliché the horror ended up being at times. It relies on the same trope seen in many other horror movies like it. The flickering lights, a scary child, doors closing by themselves, a Ouija board, and some good old-fashioned jump scares to boot. That's not to say that the movie isn't scary at all, as the ghost does have a threatening presence throughout the story, and it is suspenseful when the movie is more focused. It's just that it feels less impactful when it borrows concepts from other movies of the same genre and doesn't use them with any sort of novelty. The way the movie approaches its comedy was also a mixed bag for me. Once again, I liked that the movie wasn't too heavy-handed and kept things relatively light while being serious when it needed to be. The girls all have great banter with each other, and there are individual situations like swatting someone's hand during a Ouija session or bumping into a light post while parking parking that were pretty amusing. Sometimes though, the comedy can either feel out of place or drag on longer than it needs to. It tended to suffer from tonal shifts that proved jarring during key events of the story, especially in the final act, which only adds to the confusion I felt while trying to make sense of it all. The one thing I can safely say I did not find any fault with in the movie was how it took advantage of its setting. The aesthetic presentation behind this movie is simply amazing, as everything about it adds to the fun and tension behind a paranormal detective story. The music is dark while also being whimsical in keeping with the more comedic tone, the visuals and lighting are sublime and feel natural, especially during the ghost scenes, and it's clear the filmmakers put a lot of effort into portraying the time period where it takes place. It feels like the framework is there to have a solid and fun paranormal mystery movie, but somewhere along the way, it loses itself amidst all the exposition it throws out. While this description is oddly fitting and it is still enjoyable to some degree, the movie still would benefit from having a more cohesive and focused narrative nonetheless. Overall, Phenomena is a decent horror comedy that starts off on the right foot, but fails to build a proper sense of mystery. If you like watching horror movies that are lighter in tone and don't mind confusing stories, you might enjoy checking this out. It's so weird to see a movie that I feel like I should enjoy a lot, and yet for every good thing in it, there's something else behind it that holds it back from reaching its potential. It's still fun to watch, but it never quite reaches phenomenal levels of memorability. What did you think about this movie? Did you find it balanced its horror and comedy well, or were you also confused by the story? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Phenomena. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the American romantic comedy, A Tourist's Guide to Love. Bye bye!